A cake eater discovers that his wife has also been eating cake. I'm a cake eater. That's what they call people who want to have their cake and eat it too. I'm happily married, but I've been cheating on my wife for 6 years. It all started when I found myself caught up in an affair. My affair partner is a nice lady, but it was a big mistake, and it's haunted me ever since. I told myself it was just a little fling, a distraction. But 6 years later, I still find myself living a double life. I live with my wife, my best friend, the person I share my life with, and our 2 beautiful daughters, who remind me every day how lucky I am. But I also had this other life, this secret life, full of lies and stolen moments. The secret life almost got blown up a while back. My affair partner's husband found out about us. He was angry and hurt, and he decided to do something about it. He showed up at her work and gave her divorce papers right there. It was a bombshell, like a bomb that exploded in my stomach. I knew, deep down, that it was only a matter of time before my own wife found out. My life as I knew it was hanging by a thread. It felt like I had days or hours left before my world came crashing down. The days that followed were a blur of panic and fear. My body felt like it was vibrating, but my mind was somehow clear, like I was observing everything around me from a distance. It was a strange feeling, one that reminded me of the time leading up to my dad's passing. Everything seemed slower, the world slowed to a crawl, and all I could focus on were the little details. I felt the need to soak up every moment with my family. I spent all my free time with my wife and girls. It was a way to escape the storm that was brewing inside of me. I noticed everything. The way my wife's hair smelled, the clothes she wore, my daughter's laughter, the color of the kitchen tiles, the dog's happy barks, the way the sunlight filtered through the trees in our backyard. I told myself that this is what mattered, what was real. I felt a deep love for my family, a pang of guilt for putting them in this precarious position, a mixture of fear and regret, like a bomb ticking away in the back of my mind, counting down the seconds until it exploded. My daughters were everything to me. It was so hard to imagine what they'd think of me if they ever found out. How could I even look them in the eye? They wouldn't understand the complex web of lies and deceit I'd woven. My heart felt like it was going to burst. I could only see a vision of myself as a selfish man who was a failure of a father, a failure of a husband. My brain kept asking the same questions, over and over. How could I justify the 6 years I'd wasted with this affair partner? Was it even forgivable? How would I ever face the consequences? The truth was that the affair had been going on for so long that it seemed like an essential part of my life, even though I knew it was destroying everything that was good and honest. And then there was my wife. I looked at her, my love, my wife. She had been there for me, always. We had our share of ups and downs, but she was my rock, my best friend, the love of my life. It wasn't like I didn't love her. I did. With all my heart. I could never imagine a life without her. She was everything to me. But in that moment, I was consumed by fear and guilt, so overwhelmed with dread that it felt like a physical burden I carried around. It felt like a weight crushing me, squeezing my chest. I didn't know what to do, how to even start to make things right. But I knew one thing. This storm was coming, and it wouldn't be pretty. The secret life, this dark secret, was about to become public knowledge, and the consequences would be unimaginable. The life I knew, the world as I knew it, was hanging by a thread. It was only a matter of time. I had a decision to make. Should I try to hold it all in, hoping the storm would blow over? Or should I face my wife and try to make things right, even if it meant losing everything? Would my wife understand? Could she ever forgive me? Could we work through this together? I didn't have the answers. The weekend was approaching, and the deadline loomed over me. I decided to tell her. I would tell her everything. I wasn't sure how I'd tell her. The words felt heavy, threatening, a looming avalanche of guilt and shame. How do you start a conversation that will change everything? I didn't have a plan. I just knew that I had to do it, that it was the only way to begin to make things right. Even if it meant risking losing everything. There was a tiny glimmer of hope that she could understand, that we could work through this together, but it was a faint flicker of hope against the overwhelming tide of fear. It was too much to carry alone. I knew I needed help, someone to talk to, someone who could offer a listening ear and some kind of guidance. I made an appointment with a therapist. He seemed kind and understanding, like a beacon of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me. Maybe, just maybe, with his help, I could work through the mess I'd created. Maybe, just maybe, I could fix this. My brother, on the other hand, offered me a different perspective, one that filled me with even more unease. He'd left his wife a few years back and ended up with his affair partner. He seemed happy with her now, but it wasn't exactly what you'd call a happily ever after. He said the grass isn't greener on the other side. He was going to leave his new wife, but he couldn't do it yet, trapped in this new life that he had created, a life that he now realized was just as flawed and messy as the one he had left behind. He told me to stay quiet. "Don't tell your wife," he said. "If she asks about anything, just downplay it. Let your affair partner down easy. You don't want her telling your wife anything." His advice was all about protecting myself, about holding on to the illusion of normalcy, of keeping the family together. His advice felt so wrong, so empty. It didn't address the core of my issues. It was like putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. It was about preserving the appearances, about maintaining the facade of a happy family, when the truth was that our family was cracking at the seams. But his words echoed in my head, like a warning from a ghost. "Don't tell her. It's best if she doesn't know," the voice inside my head whispered. But the truth was I couldn't hold it in any longer. The secrets felt like a weight I could no longer bear. I needed to tell someone. And then I remembered the online forums. People who were going through the same thing. I knew I wasn't the only one. It was like searching for a map through a dense, dark forest, knowing that there was another person out there who had gone down this same dark road, who might know the way back. I was searching for understanding, for guidance, for a way to make things right. I decided to confide in the internet. It was risky, sharing my darkest secrets in a digital space where anyone could read my words. But the truth was that I was desperate, searching for an escape, a lifeline in a sea of my own making. The online forums were full of people just like me. People struggling with infidelity, with lies, and with the consequences of their choices. It was scary, yet strangely comforting. To know I wasn't alone, that others were navigating the same dark paths. I reached out, pouring out my heart on the digital page. I explained what had happened. My secret life, the lies, my wife, my daughters, the affair partner, and her husband's decision to file for divorce. I was hoping for some answers, for some insight. Instead, I was met with questions and criticism. People asked how I could possibly love my wife while carrying on an affair for so many years. I had to explain. I didn't have a problem with separating love from sex. My heart belonged to my wife. She was the one. She always would be. It was an attempt at explaining the complexity of emotions, a world that felt bigger than anything I could ever understand. People accused me of not caring about my affair partner. 6 years is a long time, they said, as if it was an argument against the love I felt for my wife. I defended myself. I wrote about how she was smart, beautiful, and funny. It wasn't her fault I was drawn to her, a kind, intelligent, and exciting woman. I told myself that there was a difference between love and desire, between passion and devotion. And I knew that even though I had lied to both of them, I loved my wife more than I loved my affair partner. I had to convince myself of this. But then it was my turn to be blindsided. My affair partner contacted me. She showed me a blurry picture of my wife with another man. It wasn't clear where or when the picture was taken, but she said she'd seen them at a store a few towns over, walking hand in hand to his car. She'd even managed to snap a photo of the license plate. I went online and did some digging, and it didn't take long to confirm it. My wife was having an affair. It was too much. It was overwhelming, like a tsunami of confusion. My world was crashing down, collapsing around me, but this time, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't me. It was her, my wife. She had broken my trust, shattered my illusions. I felt the anger bubble up, hot and acidic, burning in my throat. It was hard to comprehend how she could betray me, the one person she was supposed to love. It was hard to believe that this betrayal, this devastating act of betrayal, was a part of my wife's reality. How could she? This time, there was no relief, no escape. This time, I was left staring down into an abyss of my own making, the reflection staring back at me. A liar, a cheat, and a fool. The ground underneath my feet began to crack, and I was sinking. What was I going to do now? Was this payback for all my actions? Was it karmic retribution? I wanted to be angry at my wife. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry out in despair, how could you? But instead, I found myself numb. I felt a terrible pain, the pain of betrayal and shattered dreams. It was so much bigger than any pain I had ever experienced before. My first instinct was to keep it a secret, just like my own affair. I didn't want to hurt my wife. I was so worried about her reaction. But that didn't make sense. My actions, my lies, my deceit were part of what led to this betrayal. There were no good answers, no solutions, no way out of the darkness I had created. I needed to talk to her, to face the consequences of my actions, to figure out what to do next. But I was scared. I wasn't prepared for her reaction, for the anger that would erupt like a volcano from deep inside her heart. I managed to get a hold of my wife's phone, hoping to find out more about her affair, to get some answers. I wanted to know why she was doing this. Was she mad at me? Was she just seeking revenge? Or was she really in love with the other man? I read through the messages between my wife and her lover, the same messages that I myself had once shared with my affair partner, the same secrets that I had been living with, hiding in the darkness, pretending they didn't exist. It felt like I was staring into a mirror. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like I was walking a tightrope across a chasm with no end in sight. I was horrified and deeply hurt. I needed answers. I couldn't live in this limbo forever. I didn't know what I'd do if she told me she wanted to leave, if she didn't want to fix things, if she really was in love with the other guy. It didn't make sense to me. I thought that it was fine if we both had our little affairs, as long as we never told each other. It felt like hypocrisy at its finest, a double standard in the purest form. It felt like we were both playing by a set of rules that no one had ever agreed to, where love and trust had become interchangeable concepts, where our morals were in constant flux, shifting and rearranging themselves to fit the latest set of circumstances. But my heart felt heavy, like a rock dragging me down to the bottom of a bottomless pit. My life, as I knew it, was crumbling around me, and all I could do was watch, helplessly, as the walls closed in on me. My wife came home. I could see that something was off, like a shadow hanging over her, but she didn't seem to notice me, or if she did, she didn't show it. I made up my mind. It was now or never. I finally confronted my wife. I told her everything, about my affair, about her affair, about the hurt, the lies, and the deceit. I asked her to tell me what she was planning to do, if she loved him, and if she was ready to leave me. My wife was caught off guard, thrown off balance by my confession. She seemed stunned, speechless. But I felt a glimmer of hope, a small sliver of possibility in her reaction. Maybe she'd be honest with me, maybe she wouldn't lie to me. She retreated to the bathroom, hiding behind closed doors, and stayed there for 10 long minutes. The silence stretched out, filled only with the ticking clock, a constant reminder of the inevitable. When she finally returned, she looked me in the eyes. There was no fear, no guilt, only a strange kind of acceptance in her gaze, a sadness, a resignation, that broke my heart. I needed her to say she didn't love him, that it was a mistake, that she still loved me. I needed her to offer a glimmer of hope, to show me that we could still work things out. But she said something entirely different. I know about your affair. I've known for a while. I'm in love with him, and I want a divorce. I couldn't believe it. It felt like a nightmare, a horrible dream from which I couldn't wake up. My mind spun. The words hung in the air, filled with the sting of betrayal, the finality of loss. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and pain. I couldn't seem to make sense of what was happening, what my next step should be. My wife moved into the spare room, the separation a stark reminder of the shattered pieces of our once perfect family. She began making appointments with lawyers. I tried to talk to her, to understand, to try and make things right, but she was shutting me out. And then came the worst part, the part that cut me to my very core. She told our daughters. I tried to protect them, tried to shelter them from the storm raging around them. But my efforts were in vain. They heard the whispers, saw the tension, the heartache etched on their mother's face. They saw the separation, the silence that had become the new normal. Their innocence had been shattered. I felt my heart break in two, knowing that the trust and security I had built with them was dissolving, replaced with fear and uncertainty. My life was no longer my own. It was consumed by a hurricane of emotions. The lies I'd told had consequences, a ripple effect, like a stone thrown into a lake, creating ever-expanding circles that reached further and further, leaving destruction in their wake. I felt a deep shame. How had I managed to mess things up so badly? It felt like an avalanche, a force of nature I couldn't control. I was drowning in a sea of regret. I was losing everything. I was on autopilot. I signed up for therapy, started taking pills to deal with my insomnia, and started counting down the seconds, the minutes, the hours, the days that stretched out in front of me like an eternity. It felt like a dream, A nightmare I couldn't escape, a scene from a movie that I was somehow stuck in, the ending already written, the characters unable to break free from their roles. It felt surreal, impossible, like my entire life had turned on its axis, spun into a swirling vortex of chaos. I had tried to have my cake and eat it too. And now, I was left with nothing but the crumbs. I was going to lose my wife, my family, and everything I ever cared about. It felt like a never-ending punishment, the weight of my choices a constant presence in my life. My world was forever changed. I would never be the same person again.